Hello everyone, this is Dave from Woodwork, and today I'm going to discuss dog holes. I've had a lot of requests about this over the last year or so, and most recently yesterday I believe it was. So I'm going to try and go over some of the placement of the dog holes. Obviously kind of give you a be all end all where you should put your dogs, because everybody's work is slightly different, and even if you're all making the same things, the processes might be a little bit different. So there's not a one size fits all with this, but I can kind of point you in the right direction and show you some examples, show you some things that I personally think should be where they are. So probably before we get into it, a word of advice would be to start off with as few as holes as possible, and work your way to actually drill more holes, and that way you're not going to end up with a bench that's got like 100 million holes in it. That's my personal opinion anyway. So I'm going to get into this. Again, this is probably going to be a little bit tricky filming, obviously, because a bird's eye view would be better, but obviously I'm going to be in the way if it's a bird's eye view, so bear with us with the angles. So try and get it covered as best as possible. I'm going to start with what I would identify as the top of the bench, or the front of the bench rather. So pretty much 3/4 of the way down the bench I do have three rows of dogs. So I've got my centre row, I have the two outside rows. So with this I would definitely recommend that you have two either side, most definitely. So obviously your bench might be wider, and I think I've got about 4 benches here, and they are all different sizes. This is probably the least in width that I have. So I kind of same again, I can't really say, you know, come so far in from either side and start your row of dogs going down. It just doesn't work like that, you know. Even where these dogs are placed I feel that the dogs could be further towards the outside to give us more room on the inside, and it would allow for other things, you know. I'm really not going to go into everything, but it would allow for other things if they were wider. So as I said, don't just jump in and just do like a ton of holes, because they might be in the wrong place for you. So I've placed these at 2.5 inches, obviously from the edge, going to the center of the dog hole itself. Now, if I was going to redo this, if I could take away the holes and re-drill them, obviously I can't, but if I was going to, I think I'd probably more than likely come somewhere maybe 2 inches to the center, or maybe even 1.5 inches possibly. So these 2 holes here on the outside, I use these all the time. Highly recommend getting these 2 holes in, whether it be the measurements I've just said, or whether you bring them in a little bit more. Obviously not too much more, but I definitely recommend these 2. So what I tend to use these more for is basically planing stops. So basically just put up like that. The first bench that I had, or rather the first bench that I made, these 2 dog holes were pretty close together, and as what I found, when they were close together, when I was planing or using a card scraper, it would turn like that. So obviously the wider they are apart, it's going to support the piece better. So when you're more next to here, you don't have to keep on moving the piece, where on this one I do have to move it a little bit. So they're pretty handy for that. And sometimes is what I'll do with this as well. If I have short little pieces to cut, maybe something the size of this, I'll pop a dog in, and I'll stick a wedge in. That might have to be 2 wedges. So I might pop them in like so, and and then I can pop to the edge of the bench and I can start sawing, you know, and that's got that ain't going anywhere. So that's another way I use these. Those are pretty handy. These placements coming down, they are a bit choppy. The only thing that really stays consistent with them is the spacing between the two outside ones and the middle ones coming down. And then obviously you've got these guys, you know, spotted about down here. You know, as I said before, there's a lot of different ways you can do this, and it just depends on the way you work. So another thing you might want to do, what I've just started doing quite recently, is I added this hole here. So this is just offset from the center. Now, is what I'd probably do in future, this hole here, I wouldn't keep it in line with the center. I would actually move this one over to here, which would be the same position as this. And what I've started doing this for is when I'm putting a piece in, obviously that peg stops it from going anywhere, so the two pieces are lined against here and that can't go anywhere. So you don't really need this if you don't so you don't really need this one if you're using a wedge, sorry. So if you were to use a wedge, you would just pop it in, stick your wedge in, you know, and that's not really needed. Obviously you can, but as I've said, is what I've started doing. I've started to put one here. I've drilled this extra hole in, and there's even an extra hole drilled here. So is what this allows us to do is not to use the wedge. I have showed this on my Instagram. I've showed this, I believe I've showed this in a shorts video on YouTube as well. So go and check that out, and you'll see a bit of a better description. So my point is with this is that I commonly use material. This is like, I think this is around about 21 millimeters in thickness. I use material like this all the time, so it's beneficial for me to have the spacings where I have them. So let's say, for instance, you had a space, you constantly used material. For argument's sake, we'll say 30 centimeters. These dogs are not going to be no good, so this hole here would want to be moved a little bit further to the outside to accommodate that 30 millimeters. How I get around this, and how you would get around this if you're using multiple thicknesses of material, you'd obviously have these holes spaced apart away from the center. So obviously if this was double the thickness, I would use this hole here, and I would just basically put a, you know, just put a peg in there, you know, if kind of that was the thickness, and obviously I'd be able to get another wedge into there. Obviously I'd have to rearrange me spacings, but I tend to find the center pieces, the center holes rather, they're kind of more for planing. That's what I tend to use them for more. But it's a really hard subject to talk about this, because as I said, there's not a be all end all. I'm trying to give you like examples. So kind of another example, you might be a chair maker, or you might do some sort of bending. I haven't actually got anything like a back of a chair, anything like that, but I'm gonna try and simulate it just to show you what I'm talking about. So if you build the same sort of chair day in and day out, I don't know, whatever chair you make, the shoulder crests at the back is obviously going to be consistent. So obviously you might need to have it clamped into place. You might be rounding over the top, you might be planing the top, you might be doing some bent lamination on a regular basis. Okay, just to try and simulate what I'm talking about with the bent lamination. So I've kind of got these 3 dog pegs into place. I have one of the dogs. So basically, you know, so I've got it pretty much clamped into place here. It's button against just, so that would enable me to plane this way, and pretty much start from here going all the way along. And because it's button against here, the thing can't slide out. Obviously this is only like 2mm thick, so it wouldn't bend, but just to try and give you an idea. So depending on what you're doing day in and day out, you might want to change these arrangements. So that's kind of another one to bear in mind. Another thing to take into consideration is how far these holes are actually apart. As I said before, I probably would have preferred these to be more towards the outside. I should have put the outside holes more towards the outside of the bench itself. Obviously I can't do anything about it now, so you know, if I was to do it, there would just be excess holes, and I'm not going to do it. I am kind of going to do a build on the Roman workbench. If you want to see the build, let us know in the comments, and I will consider it. But obviously I have built about 5 or 6 of these now, so I've kind of got a good idea what I want kind of in my head. So hopefully it kind of should be the last build I do. That's going to include like dog holes, placements, you know, the shave horse attachment, things like that. So if you'd like to see that, don't forget to leave a comment. Also any of this as well, I will be happy to answer questions. I'll answer as many as I can, so don't be shy and leave a comment, leave a question. I'll try and get back to you. So as I was saying, if you are using say 9-inch boards or whatever, you know, take into consideration, especially if you're wanting to clamp them into place. So I've got a dog in here and I've got a dog here. So I've got this board. This is an ash board. I don't typically use this size, to be honest. What's this? That is nearly 190 millimeters. What's that? That's 7 3/8. So that's this size I don't normally get. This is ash as well, and I don't really use ash. This is just something I had lying around. So take for instance, if we wanted this in position, we may be carving. So this would be a pretty good example for carving. So I've got the two dogs in here, and I've just put a peg in here. So this, for me, it's not actually, the whole space is not actually adequate, although I am getting away with it. I mean, left and right it ain't going anywhere, backwards and forwards rather. So this would actually be quite good, you know, if I was to be, you know, basically carving. So same again, you kind of want to take this into consideration if you are a carver, or you want a single board clamped into position like this. You know, make sure the holes are going to be wide apart. If you do typically use something like that, you know, you might typically use a foot in width board. That might be typical for you, where it's not typical for me. So my typical size is 170 millimeters. Now I can get 170 millimeters between the two of these, so it's not a great issue for me. With regard to the holes panning out down that way, I basically stopped the holes here. I didn't see the point in extending the holes any further down the bench. There's no set, other than the fact that those are like 11 inches apart, so there's no set other than the fact that it's 11, 11 and 11, where this one, you know, that's 10. The next one is actually 7.5 up to here. So it tends to be more on the, what I consider the front of the bench. That's where the main holes are. These holes, like round about this area, I don't really use a lot, not at all. As I said, I didn't really see the points of going down, like carrying the holes down, because it just don't get used. So that might be something else for you to, you know, to think about. If you don't think you're going to be down that end of the bench with whatever you're doing, you know, because at the end of the day, the material you might be using might be something like that. That might be the biggest piece of material you use, or the longest piece, you know. So what's the point in you know, making all those holes, going to the trouble to make all those holes? There's just no point at all. You're just creating work for yourself. The bench has got a whole lot of holes in it. You know, there's just no point to it. Okay, so I have babbled on quite a bit, but these are my recommendations, okay, for the dog holes. What I would do, as I said, I would definitely keep these free. This center one, I would actually shift it over to here. I have already explained why. The center ones coming down, I would definitely keep those. You know, it's same again. It's like kind of, you know, that's like 2.5. That's free, and that's free. And then the next one is like 7.5, you know. So there's no formula that you can follow. Basically, it's just kind of, there's quite a lot of these holes I've added over time, just because it's been better for me, and I think that's what you're better off doing. It's probably not what you want to hear, but it's going to be better for you to do that. So I would definitely keep the center run, most definitely. Same again, these holes here, these are more to trap the piece of wood in. You know, as I said, I've demonstrated different ones where I put a peg in, I'll actually bend this into place and I don't have to use a wedge. Those were some of the more recent holes I've added. Obviously, if you're using different thicknesses, you're going to have more holes more towards here, and that's just going to allow you to wedge. So I would definitely say, you know, some of these here, same again, I can't really give you the measurements for them because it just might not work for you, you know, and I don't really want you to put them in because I say so and then it not work. You know, you're really going to have to just basically trial it out, trial and error basically. These two here, more so this one, doesn't get touched a lot. You know, that's actually quite stiff when I put a peg in it, you know, or a dog in it. I have trouble getting it in and out. It's just because I never use it, very rare I use it. Same with this one, I don't really typically use that one a lot. Moving further down, same again, I don't typically use these three here, not a great deal. Occasionally, these three here, it's hitty missy. It is, it's really hitty missy. Pretty much from here to here, them's the main guys. As I said, these two here, I probably wouldn't even bother putting them in again, to be honest with you. You know, I think when a lot of people put these in, they like them to be all symmetrical, and you know, they like them to be some sort of a pattern, where I will kind of agree. You know, sometimes if there's a pattern, it will work okay for you. But another thing you might want to consider if you're using holdfast is where the how much area they'll actually cover, you know. So if I had a hole here where the hole fast is actually in, and then my next hole, you know, wasn't here, it might cause us problems, you know. That's something you might want to think about. So while I'm on the subject of placements, I may as well talk a little bit about the placements of the notch. So in the very first one I've done, a bit later on, maybe about 6 months into the use of it, I actually added a notch right at the front in the center, and it was absolutely excellent. It was really good. Just a notch wedge, put it in. It was great for doing things like tenons, things like that. Sometimes when you're doing a 10-inch that can be a little bit restrictive, especially if you're using a Japanese saw. When you're using a Japanese saw, obviously the handle protrudes down, so if you're cutting, the bench can actually hinder you. So with the notch being here, it was absolutely great. The only issue is that you're tightening pieces of wood in there with a wedge, and a wedge pushes things apart, so it actually started to push the bench apart, or crack the bench rather. I did actually add like a kind of a bit of a support, but I kind of stopped using it after that. I actually still have the bench is still usable, but I actually stopped like using that system for that. With the first bench as well, I actually had this, I'm not sure the measurement, but this notch was actually more towards here, which again I thought was better because it gives us more freedom with the Japanese saws. So this one is actually 14 inches down. So my issue was same again with the wedge being here, and with the notch being here, and you're using the wedge. In time it actually started to crack and split. If I had kept on using that there, it would have just basically split the thing out, took the corner off. So I actually tried to reinforce it. I think I put like big screws into it, I think I put dowel into it. It didn't work, it just continued to split, so I had to stop using it. So basically is what I've done, added an extra notch and just basically on the other side and put it further down the bench. So that's something to take into consideration. Also, what side of the bench are you going to want it? You might, if it's wide enough, you might actually choose to put 2 notches in, which I think on the next build I think I actually might do that. All my notches I believe have been on this side, I believe, other than the one I've just been talking about where I had to swap it around. So I think this one, I can't remember the reason why I put this on this side, but I find this a little more awkward, so bear that in mind as well. Also, it's just dawned on us here, if you are left-handed, everything I've basically been through, you just kind of want to mirror it to the other to the other side. It totally slipped my mind that. So obviously for all these center holes are still going to be good, but obviously these holes what I've just been talking about, these kind of want to be over this side. It just might be a point, you'll probably already know that if you're left-handed in your woodwork, and you'll probably know that already, but I just thought I'd mention it. So where I say these holes are pretty much redundant for me, they wouldn't be redundant for you, you'd possibly be using them. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. Okay, so I'm just kind of going to take you down the bench with some wobbly camera action here, but yeah, try to explain it a little bit better, or what I am and what I'm not using. So these 3 holes here, as I said, don't typically get used a lot. These holes here, they're just like so hitty missy, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Then from this dog hole pretty much all the way up, and that's kind of what I use. So as you can see, there's really no sort of arrangement to them. Obviously you can see this arrangement here, you know, those are in line, those are squared across. Those kind of look in line, these ones, but it's just how they ended up. As I said, I've just literally added all these. This is the top one, what I was on about, where this guy here, it should have been here, and this guy should have been non-existent. Obviously you don't want to be getting things too close to the edge. That should be all right, I would think, but obviously, you know, it's the same if you're going kind of more towards the edge this way. Don't go all the way to the edge. Obviously you're just creating, you know, it's just going to be weak basically. That's pretty much it. This is such a difficult topic to talk about. I feel I haven't really done it justice. I have tried to explain the best of my ability. I'm more than happy to answer questions. If you've got questions, you know, drop us a DM, or, you know, just write the comments on YouTube, and I'll try to get back to you as quick as possible. As I said, this isn't a science, you know. If it was, you know, you'd already have all the placements. So I've tried to explain it the best I can, and, you know, as I said, I'm happy to answer any questions. So yeah, that's it for today, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you've liked what you've watched.